Hello, everybody. Sorry, technical difficulties. Uh, Welcome to True Crime Myths, Legends, and More podcast. Make sure that you check out all the other episodes, comment below, and do all that stuff. But today we have another incredible episode. We have Doug Kari with us today. He is an author, investigative journalist, and attorney, best known for his in depth, hands on approach to true crime writing. He is the author of the Berman Murders, a book that explores the unsolved disappearance of Barry and Louise Berman in the Mojave Desert. His work is characterized by its immersive investigation style, which often involves extensive travel, interviews, and direct engagement with the locations and the people involved in the case. And so I'm excited to bring him on. So everybody, welcome Doug here. How's it going, Doug?
Jeff, hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's really good to get a chance to talk. I'm always fascinated by, all of us that are, out there in all these different facets, going out and really doing the work. And you were out there on the ground doing the work.
I try to be. The true crime ecosystem has really developed in interesting ways in the past several years. And you've got some really sincere, committed people, including your listeners, yourself, and others, who want to explore different avenues, want to help solve cases, and want to contribute where they can. It's more than just entertainment, it's involvement in real life situations. And many of the people who participate in it are able to contribute in some way to outcomes and understandings of these kinds of situations. And I love the fact that you're willing to stretch beyond the bounds and look at alternative theories and not just go right down the middle.
Yeah. That has always been something that I've always been fascinated by because, even though, cases get closed, all of these things, we really don't know everything. And until we look at all of the evidence that's out there, often people will, look at a case, they'll see things and they'll automatically make a judgment. But the problem is that unless you know all of the evidence and you can look at it from every side, there are very minute things that will absolutely change your opinion on what happened and how it happened. And if you've not seen that, you wouldn't know. There's all kinds of things out there. Now I remembered what we were talking about earlier. I did an episode on the JonBenet Ramsey case, and I had the author of I can't remember the name of the book, but anyway, Lou, who was the investigator on that case. There was another police officer that finished his work and did his book and everything on Lou's investigation, and of course the intruder theory. So we talked a bunch about that, because of course that's another case that everybody forever has blamed the parents and blamed the dad or the brother. And honestly, before I did that interview, I was in the brother camp, and I thought that that was the case. And then we talked, and he gave me more evidence than I could ever hope to get any other way. And somebody who was there and directly involved with things had all of that knowledge, and he changed my mind. Understanding that case for sure changed my mind. So it is it is only through really digging in and looking at all of that stuff and hearing all the different sides of a story that we can truly understand what is going on. you know and I'm always amazed at, I have very strong opinions about things sometimes, and looking into these cases, I will talk to somebody and find out some new evidence that I didn't see before, and it radically shifts my opinion. Even going to Jack the Ripper. I did an episode on Jack the Ripper, and the gentleman that I had on here, believes that it is Francis Tumblety. And so we had a lot of conversation, but the evidence that he had, like, I got to tell you, if it wasn't him, I don't know who it was, because just the continuity between the murders that happened there while he was there, and then the murders that happened back here in the States, an additional 30 plus murders that happened here, uh, dubbed the Railway Ripper murders, are, forensically consistent with the murders in Whitechapel, and all could place him at the scene. And I'm like, okay, there's something there, right? Like, it's fascinating to get that backstory, but I would have never known that without talking to him. Maybe I would have ran across it at some point, maybe reading a book or an article, but really talking to people and hearing that and seeing that really changes the perspective and understanding because let's face it, we all sit there and we watch the documentaries and we think I've seen everything, but they're all slanted, right? They all have their own personal point of view, their agendas that they're trying to get through. And so, you really need to look at everything to understand it. Wow, that was a long-winded way to say that.
But the point is well taken, because sometimes in the true crime arena, people are trying to come up with something new in order to interest the public, explore a new angle, and sometimes again it's a little more along the lines of entertainment.
Yeah.
I take a different approach. I like to immerse myself in cases and really understand to the best of my ability what happened and why it happened, so that when I do come away and form a theory, it's a theory that's been formed because I went deep in the case, and not because I came into the case assuming that I already knew the answer and then looking for evidence to back that up, so-called confirmation bias. It's a natural human tendency, and we want easy answers. We want to believe our intuition is right. We want to think that we can spot the truth and go that direction. But we have to understand how our own mind works and sometimes battle against the tendencies of our own mind to jump to conclusions and want to get simple answers and tie up all the loose ends. Sometimes situations aren't like that. Sometimes we'll never know. The John Benet Ramsey case being a classic example. We will never know what went on under that roof. I tend to lean towards the brother theory, but I haven't done all the current deep diving that's been done. Anyway, with that in mind, I try as best I can to keep an open mind and just see where the evidence leads, and also try to understand why. Why would the evidence lead that way? Why does this make sense? It's fascinating. We're exploring human behaviors and incidents that are real, that involve the highest level of human drama. The stakes are high, the victims are real, and it's quite emotional and quite gripping. And again, it's an area that I've devoted a lot of my adult life to now, as a passion, as an avocation, because I want to be able to contribute something of my own to this field.
Absolutely. So this is kind of funny how I entered in. Like, I've always been, interested in true crime. I grew up around it. So it's kind of in my blood. But, this avenue, getting into that, I actually started with, on the other side, my card game, which is a true crime card game that I developed. And the whole intent in any of the gaming stuff that I do is really to get people to understand the psychology and to be able to step into that. And, one of the things that I want to leave at the end of all of this is I want to, encourage people, because we need more people to get into the field. We need more people to get out there and to be interested in this stuff, because we need more programs out there. We need programs that help these people before they become, the next Bundy or Dahmer or whatever. We need those programs out there. We also need more investigators that are out there doing the work and really interested in that. One of the things I'm working on currently is a role-playing game that is very detective focused. And so with a lot of my knowledge of true crime and, stuff like that, you'll be able to go in there and play as a detective, a forensic investigator, or a killer, and you'll be able to go there and solve cases and go through what does that look like what process do people go through when they're investigating these things, much deeper than you can go just watching the first 48 or something like that, and really kind of immerse themselves in understanding, along with that, you were mentioning this too, understanding the toll that takes on people, right? Being immersed in this field, that toll that it takes on people's psyche, having to deal with, all of this horrible stuff that happens all the time, in our world. And so there is those factors in the game as well as you're going through. What does that do to you as you're being exposed to all of these things and all of these people? And I think it'll be a very, very unique balance
Nice.
uh, to be able to get in there and play around with that. I actually was working on, doing some stuff with it today before I got on. So I'm really excited about that coming out. But yeah, I think it is a fascinating field, and we just need so many more people out there with fresh ideas and understanding to get out there and to do it, and we could be so much further along. So you have your book, The Berman Murders. So tell us a little bit about that.
So, Barry and Louise Berman are two of the most interesting victims that I've ever researched. They were hippies. Barry was 17 years younger than his wife Louise, and they came from very different backgrounds, Jeff. Louise came from a working class part of Los Angeles. She was an abuse survivor as a young woman. Her mother was a little bit out of control, had various lovers and husbands come and go. And so Louise grew up in sort of an unstable environment. And like a lot of women who grow up in that kind of environment, she became promiscuous at a young age. She was very attractive and beautiful woman who attracted a lot of men and probably wanted some of the male attention that she didn't get when she was young. And of course, she'd been clouded by this abuse. By the time she met Barry, she'd had 3 children. She had gone through a couple of husbands, and she was 3 husbands to be exact. And she was in a hippie phase, living in Los Angeles, and at a time when the 60s were happening, people were doing acid. So she was all that, dropping acid, hanging out, music. And Barry, he experimented with drugs, but was a more serious kind of guy and came from a completely different background, Jeff. He grew up in a household that was fabulously wealthy. He was the only child of a guy named Jules Berman. If you've heard of the liqueur Kahlua, at the time that Jules Berman got into the liquor business and bought the Kahlua brand, nobody had heard of it. It sold maybe 1,000 cases a year. But Jules was a gifted entrepreneur, and he became a liquor distributor at a young age. He was instrumental in bringing Bass Pale Ale, Heineken, and other well-known foreign brands into the U.S. because after World War II, he perceived a shift that people would pay a premium for these exotic brands. And when he had an opportunity after he'd had some success to buy a brand of his own, he bought Kahlua, built it up into a 1 million case a year business. He had a yacht named Kahlua. He had a big place down in Acapulco. He owned a big lake house on the shores of Lake Arrowhead above Los Angeles. Not only that, he organized his partners to buy the lake itself and the 3,500 acres of surrounding woodlands. They developed the golf course. He was involved in other major real estate projects. He was into oil. He was very wealthy. They lived in a mansion with servants. He had married an old money wife from New York, and they doted on Barry. This was their only child, but Barry rejected his parents well from a young age, maybe because he grew up in an environment that was rather cold. and what he wanted was something more genuine. He was a very thoughtful young man, never really taken by his parents' wealth. Anyway, Louise was his first and only wife, and they met at a time when Barry's dad had bought a ranch north of Santa Barbara, 3,500 acres of land fronting the Pacific Ocean. And Barry and some friends who were devotees of a Punjabi guru had a little village, you might call it. They had 3 little houses on this tract of land by the ocean with a private beach, and they hung out there and they did their transcendental meditation. And it was at a satsang, it's called, in Santa Barbara, where Barry happened to run into Louise, who was looking for a place to live. She ended up moving into his house, and the 2 roommates became lovers and ultimately got married. So that's who the story is about. And the story then is about how it was that the 2 of them died in the California desert, in one of the most remote and beautiful and interesting spots anywhere in the world. How was it that they met their end in a death by foul play? That's what the book explores and endeavors to answer.
That's fascinating. I know it's funny because, you think during that time, of course, in California, there are a lot of things happening during that same time period. The hippie movement is happening, and of course, and I've shared this a bunch of times, but early in the '60s, my dad met Manson, and so that was early on in my, I grew up with these stories, and he would tell me about meeting him, and my dad wanted to rob him of his drugs because Manson wouldn't let him come to the party, because my dad was about 6'2" and about 220, and Manson's all of like 5'2" and 140 pounds. He was not interested in my dad coming and having anything to do with any of the girls or anything like that. So which is really funny because my dad, later on, of course, once he figured out everything that was going on, was always fascinated with it, and was like, man, I might have been Tex. And I'm like, oh man, like, don't start that. like, no, we don't need any of that. But, that is during the same time frame that's all happening as well. There.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, Jeff, because there actually is a Manson connection in the sense that the place where Barry and Louise were camping was a remarkable set of hot springs called the Saline Valley Warm Springs in the middle of Saline Valley, which is now a remote part of Death Valley National Park. And it was one of the places that Manson frequented. In fact, at the time that they committed the Tate LaBianca murders, they were living in a canyon further south out there in the desert. And Manson believed that somewhere out in the desert was a portal that would lead to the center of the earth. And Saline Valley has these very deep natural hot springs. And the story is that Tex actually scalded himself trying to dive down and see if one of these natural hot springs led to the mythical portal. And I actually have a photo of Manson at those hot springs. Anyway, this spot, these natural hot springs over the years had been developed into stone and cement bathing pools. And it was the kind of place where nobody wore clothes and there was a lot of weed, but it wasn't a hedonistic party scene so much as it was a back to nature kind of a place. And when Barry and Louise went out there camping, it was right at the beginning of January 1986, and they were on a makeup trip. Jeff, they'd been married about 5 years, and they'd gone through a rough patch in 1985. In fact, they'd stopped sharing a bed, but they patched it up and decided to go on a trip out to the desert. Ended up in Saline Valley, camping at these beautiful hot springs. I've spent a lot of time out there. There's mountains that surround this valley, one of the remote canyons in the mountain ranges that surrounds the valley has a waterfall in it. All my kids were baptized under that waterfall. I know my way around out there without a map, and so I was, hanging out there in that same time period when they went.
Wow.
So when we found out that a wealthy couple, as it turned out, from Santa Barbara, had gone missing, for the people who would hang out in the scene, it was like, what? Because it was the most peaceful, wonderful kind of an environment. They camped at these hot springs. There were some other people around. They got up one morning, they took a walk out into the wilderness, and they never came back. And the question was, what happened? There was a massive search, Jeff, a massive search, biggest in Inyo County history. They had aerial assets from all over California, fixed wing aircraft as well as helicopters, Stockton National Guard, the CHP, the Navy base down at China Lake, et cetera, as well as ground searchers from all the surrounding communities and counties. So they had this pristine desert valley like a war zone for weeks as they scoured the desert for the heir apparent to the Kahlua fortune and his wife. Not a trace turned up until almost 3 years later in a remote corner of Saline Valley, rugged miles away from the hot springs, when a hiker who was trying to find his way back from a mountaineering trip and was crossing a remote part of the desert saw something shining in the sun, and it was a human skull.
Wow. It's always funny how it's like it often ends up being the hikers or the runners that are out there, going, that they find these things that are, way out in the middle of nowhere, because they're the only people there.
Right.
So, but it's fascinating.
It was clear from the coroner's investigation that it was a homicide. Their clothing had been removed, their shoes were gone, jewelry was gone. They had been stacked and put in a side canyon of what's called a desert dry wash, where during seasonal flooding, water comes off the mountains and carves river courses and creek beds across the desert over hundreds and thousands of years. And there was a little slot side canyon, very narrow, just big enough to put one person in and drag a body on top. And now you already had the walls essentially formed, because it was like imagine a tiny slot canyon. So they're inside there, and what he did was meticulously, the killer or killers, I believe it was one man that I identify in the book, meticulously covered them with dirt and then rocks to make it seem as if there had never been this narrow little side trench in the wash, that it was just part of the adjoining embankment. And they blended in so well that during the massive search that took place, their bodies were never spotted. And by the time they were turned up, the remains were so badly degraded that there was no physical evidence. The coroner had enough to say, yeah, this is a homicide. This was done deliberately. But what the coroner didn't have is a cause of death, a murder weapon, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Dude, that's amazing. Was it, were they able to determine if it was just, I guess for lack of a better term, erosion or rain that had washed away the dirt that exposed the skull?
That's the supposition. The supposition is that periodic flash flooding had eroded it enough that animals, and there are animals out there, coyotes and such, got in and disturbed and scattered the bones. And that's why the grave site was disturbed enough for the hiker to be able to see that this was a crime scene. And then It was reported, they came out and investigated. But ultimately, Jeff, it was just inconclusive, and it left everybody baffled. Years went by, without any solution. And to this day, there's never been an arrest or conviction in the case. But the case always haunted me because, as I said, it was a place near and dear to my heart. Believe it or not, I was, one of those hippies that would hang out there back in the day and bring the kids out. And it was just a wonderful place to explore. I became less of a hang out at the hot springs kind of a guy and more of a let's explore far and wide. And it became a big part of who I am in my life. I founded an environmental group, a desert protection group, did mountaineering in the surrounding mountains, led trips. Like I said, baptized the kids out there. It was a big part of my life. In fact, in midlife, I did a walkabout for 2 weeks along the crest of one of the mountain ranges that defines the edge of Saline Valley. But all that time, Jeff, for years, decades, I wondered what became of the Bermans because it cast a pall over the whole area. All of a sudden, it didn't seem quite as mythical and mystical and otherworldly and beautiful. It seemed more haunting and potentially foreboding than it ever had. And you really looked at people differently. And
Yeah.
it affected the whole vibe of the valley, if that makes sense. So I really wanted to get in there and find out what happened. And the thing that triggered me, which this may sound a little touchy-feely, but since you explore alternative paths, I was at that time living in San Clemente, California, in a townhouse that adjoined a park, and I had the back sliding door open, and my desk was right by the door, and the screen was closed. And I started thinking about a writing project that I would want to do. I had just completed something, and I thought I'd really like to do something that maybe gets me out into the wilds. And I thought about, out of the blue, the case. I didn't even remember their first names, but I remembered the last name. And at that very moment, this little bird comes out of nowhere and lands on the screen right next to me, the screen door. And it's like it was looking in at me. And I felt it was like a spirit visiting me. Never happened before, and it never happened again. It was actually clinging to the screen. And I felt like I'm being visited by somebody here. And it just cemented for me that I am going to go out there and try to figure this thing out.
Yeah, dude, that's amazing. And I think it's really cool. One of the things that you do, you're very hands-on with a lot of that stuff. So we were just talking, you've got some stuff coming up and you're getting ready to go out and do some of that now. You can, if you want to share any of that.
Well, let me tell you, in the Berman case, I talk about the grave. When I got out there, I was trying to picture what happened in this serene, empty, very silent place. What went down so many years ago, to the point where I ended up just lying down inside the gravesite and looking up at the sky and trying to imagine what it would be like, and what might have happened when these two wonderful, peace-loving, vegetarian people who believed in transcendental meditation and reincarnation and karma ended up slaughtered in some manner at the prime of their lives. Immersion was important to me, and I really felt called to that case. And as you mentioned, I feel called to another one right now because I'm in California. I go back and forth between California and Nevada. I'm in California right now, in Southern California, but I'm about to go up to Northern California because on July 15th, a woman named Whisper Owen, 36-year-old mom, and her 8-month-old baby inside a car coming back from a doctor's appointment in rural part of the Central Valley, following back roads in the evening, just vanished off the face of the earth. Just they're gone. And the police aren't doing enough. I think they have typecast her, profiled her as what people sometimes derisively refer to as a throwaway victim. She's a woman who's had trouble in her life. She's been in rehab. She has a criminal record, as I understand. But as I also understand, she was a good mom who was really taking good care of the baby. She was living in Sacramento, but had grown up in Fresno, and the baby's doctor was down in Fresno. She'd gotten up on July 15th at 4 in the morning, driven down to Fresno, gotten to the appointment on time. Baby had gotten some shots. She visited her brother, visited her mom. Now it was evening and she was driving back, but because she didn't have a valid license, because the car, the 2006 silver Chevy Trailblazer, was damaged. The right headlight was, the driver's side headlight was broken. She was worried about getting pulled over, getting ticketed, or maybe taken into custody. So she was taking, the theory is that she was taking back roads instead of going on US Highway 99. And that's why she was driving on the back roads. There are a couple of sightings of her on security cameras as the car was moving northward, but then just gone. And I have been so haunted by the case over the last couple of weeks, and just so troubled by everything I'm seeing and hearing, and I just can't sleep. I can't get the baby's, these photos of the baby, the image of the baby's eyes. I can't get it out of my mind, and I have to go. I just have to go. I told my wife, I'm sorry, I'm dropping everything, and I'm going to go out there and look, because the police they just aren't doing enough, even though I've been pounding them with emails. And I mean, I've been very pointed, Jeff. I wrote in an email, isn't this why you went into law enforcement? Exactly this case? A mom and a baby are endangered. Why aren't you out there pulling up all the license plate reader cameras? And they emailed me back, well, we don't have the licensing rights to be able to get access to everything. And I'm thinking, it's been 3 weeks. Figure it out. Not only that, if you can't get access, I guarantee you the U.S. Marshal's Office can. Ask them for help. They routinely get statewide and more access. For example, if you're a fleeing fugitive, they're not troubled by county boundaries or state lines. They know how to track endangered people and fugitives, but you have to ask them. You have to be proactive and beat the bushes. It's actually the family that just in the last couple of days discovered some security footage that shows the car moving northward, and it helps narrow the search area. And I'm thinking, this family who are disadvantaged, some of them are on public assistance, you're forcing them to go out there and look? I mean, isn't this what you should be doing? And the thing is, I've worked on enough cases to know it isn't always like this. Some cases, they pull out all the stops. Well, why not this case? Why not this case, Jeff? So I'm kind of fired up right now. Haven't been sleeping well, but I want to just go beat the bushes. The chance of finding anything, I know, are slim. It'd be wonderful if I could help bring the mystery to an end. At least I can help eliminate some places. And honestly, part of it is just I need it for my own therapy. I've got to go out there, get in the field, sweat, bushwhack, and try to find that car, and try some back roads, and just try to figure out where that car is. And if I don't, I will have hopefully tired myself out enough and exhausted myself that I can go back to sleep. Because right now, that's all I can think about, Jeff.
Yeah, I understand. I know. One of the cases recently that I got really involved in, and was the Delphi case. And so I'm not that far away from Delphi, Indiana. I'm a couple hours away. I live in Cincinnati. And so I travel to Chicago a ton to go up there for different conventions and things. And I'm always passing by there. And I was really involved as, everything was going through, and, the trial was going on. And so I just felt that need to go to the bridge and to see and to understand this area, and what was there, and how this may have played out. So I completely understand. So I went there. I went there. I looked around. I took some time to understand. Okay, So how did they get from this place to this place? Where did they start? And just like getting a feel for it and understanding, like, how this could have happened. And yeah, sometimes you just need to be there. You need to be there to experience that and to see what's there. You need to take the time to go out there and just immerse yourself in it. And I think that that is really important. And with this case, of course, this is something, 3 weeks. There is a high probability that there is some things out there still to find. And getting out there and seeing the different areas and looking down those back roads, whether it is the vehicle or whatever, they're and if no one else is other than just the family is doing that, I don't understand why that would be happening.
There has been some help from the true crime ecosystem. Adventures with Purpose has been out there looking at waterways. There have been others, but it hasn't gotten the same attention as some cases do, perhaps because it's in a remote area. But I specialize in remote areas, and more importantly, I feel called to it. I've been staying up late, scouring Google Maps, and I went to bed finally one night a couple of nights ago, and as morning came, I swear, Jeff, somebody knocked on my door. I, as plain as day, heard 3 knocks, and I woke up and said, "Who's there?" And there was no one, and I felt like I was being called to get up and get back at it. And Jeff, this isn't the normal Doug Kari. I'm a matter of fact guy. I'm a lawyer. I'm an investigator. I'm all about the facts, but I do think sometimes we're touched by things we don't understand, whether it's in our own minds or something paranormal, whatever it might be, that calls us to do something. And a couple of hours ago, I told my wife, "Honey, I'm sorry, but you have to understand this is the man you're married to. I can't keep going right now. I cannot just act like this is life as usual. I've got to go out there myself. And the chances of me finding anything are slim. That's okay. I've just got to go do this." She's like, "Go, go." I felt the same way, by the way, when I announced to her that I was going down to Mexico, and I ended up coming back with a woman who had been the subject of an international investigation, a woman named Hana Kobayashi, who had been hunted for by lots of people, and I ended up bringing Hannah back. It was the same thing. I just felt called to do it, and my poor wife has to do this kind of thing when I get on a wild hair like this. But you get it. It's the nature of what happens when you become involved in the true crime ecosystem, and you're somebody who's serious about it and wants to contribute and make a difference. You do get emotionally involved, and you're affected by it.
Absolutely. There are just those cases that, for whatever reason, just grip you, and you have to understand more. You have to look into those things. It just like I was doing research earlier today. We've been talking about doing some updating on some of the stuff for Delphi. So I was busy doing a bunch of research because I've been kind of incapacitated for the last several months and not able to really do a whole lot. And so I've kind of missed out on everything that's gone on since the trial has ended. And there's been so much information that's come out. I need to go back and look at that. And I know that as soon as I start, I won't be able to stop. I know how I am. And I'm just like, I'm kind of hesitant to start because then it will be the next month. All I'll be doing is watching things and listening and all these little snippets and who did an interview here. And okay, I need to know all of this. So it is, it's just fascinating how cases will grip you. And early on for me, it was, H.H. Holmes was something that I was always fascinated by. I always loved the stuff around the turn of the century. And then when I was writing Beyond the Headlines, It ended up being both the Gacy and the Dahmer case for whatever reason, probably because I know people that are directly, directly involved in some of that, that I really got really involved for some reason. And I did not think that that would be the case. I thought it would be the Holmes case that really interests me. And maybe because I knew so much about it already, it didn't interest me nearly as much. And then I thought that, I closed the book with Dennis Rader. And I thought that that one would be like the one that really gripped me, because through that process, I started talking to Dennis. And so like I talked directly to him. So I thought, well, this will be the one. And it really wasn't. It's really strange to write a book and to write your thoughts about what you think about the psychology of a killer, and then read it to them, so they know exactly what you think, and have them come back and say, you know what, that's really good. I like that, Jeff. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. But,
That's edgy stuff. That's
yeah.
edgy. I was never able to get that from the fellow that I identify as the likely perpetrator in the Berman murders. There was somebody identified by law enforcement as a possible suspect. He had been traveling alone. He was known by the name Mike. Looked like he was a military man, that he was understood to be a military man. It took them a while for the Inyo Sheriff's Office, through some remarkable detective work, to actually put a last name on him. And they did a surprise interview of him. Turned out he was the aide de camp to the commanding general of a Marine Corps logistics base near Barstow, California. And he had a habit of going out into the desert and hiking alone. And he had kind of a troubled history with women, but he liked going out to these naked hot springs. And I think he maybe misread them as being more libertine. But it's interesting. You go to a place where like that, where there's a lot of nudity. It's very different from a singles bar. It's not about people hooking up. It's more about people just getting back to their natural selves, getting back to nature. And just because females take off their clothes doesn't mean it's an invitation for some creepy guy to start hitting on them. Quite the opposite. You're expected to behave, and I mean, everybody understands. You might glance at other people's bodies and appreciate them, but you're not supposed to leer. But he was a real creepy guy. That same weekend, he had propositioned a couple for a threesome, just out of the blue. Nothing had happened that led to that being something appropriate to say. People were looking askance at him. And it turned out that on the day that the Bermans went hiking, they had gone hiking up a kind of a rough Jeep road into a remote part of the valley. Well, guess who got in his little pickup truck and slowly, went driving up that same road? It didn't come back until the end of the day, covered in dust and acting very nervous, and telling some people that he had quit smoking, but he really needed a cigarette, and he traded a can of peaches for some smokes, and then bailed out the next day and went home. Law enforcement had narrowed him down as a likely suspect, because there's not that many people out there, right?
Yeah.
And when they finally identified him and did a surprise interview, oh my gosh, I was able to get access to the sheriff's records from back then, and that the interview transcript, he was all over the board. This fellow Michael Pepe, you can look him up. He's still he's incarcerated on other charges now, but that's who I identify. And in the book, I make out a likely case by doing a deep dive on him and exploring not just factually and circumstantially how the evidence points to him, but also his character. What do we know about him beforehand? And most tellingly, what do we know about him afterwards? Because as it turns out, years later, after he left the Marine Corps, he got involved in some of the most deviant and violent sexual abuse imaginable, to the point where he's now spending life in federal prison. And I won't say any more. You got to read the book to find out more. And by the way, I just found out from the publisher that if you wait a little bit, you can get a better price. One of my concerns about the Berman murders, I have a wonderful publisher. They're considered to be a prestigious publisher, Rowman and Littlefield, now called Bloomsbury. They're a 75-year-old publisher. They just got acquired by a well-known British publisher. They brought the book out in hardcover at $34, and it just felt like it was kind of price prohibitive for a lot of true crime readers. Well, they just told me a few days ago, out of the blue, that they're going to do a full paperback run on it and bring it out at more like the $20 price point, which is more like,
Nice.
Yeah, I'm really happy about it. It was a vote of confidence. I'd gotten good reviews and good feedback, and that book definitely got me noticed in the true crime world. But at the same time, I felt like it just wasn't positioned at that price point to be something that a true crime reader, average person who's got a limited budget and they've got various choices, are they going to spend $16.95 or are they going to go spend $34, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm really excited about that. So the book will be coming out in January in paperback, and it only took me 9 years to write it.
I was on a podcast last night, and they asked me, how long it took me to write my first book. Well, my only book currently, and I'm working on volume 2 now. But my response was, my whole life, it took me to research all of this stuff, and I've been researching for years and years and years. But to actually do the physical writing, it took me 3 weeks.
Wow.
But I tend to be insane. When I get focused on something, it is nonstop. I am working on it and working on getting it done. And, I don't slow down. The funny thing is volume 2, I'm currently sitting at about a year, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through. But now I'm branching out. Volume 2 is going to be on criminals, and I found that I'm not the old West guy. Like I just can't get into it. It's really difficult for me, and so I'm starting out with like Billy the Kid in there. I'll talk about him. Then I go on to Bonnie and Clyde, and so just specifically those 2 eras are really hard for me to wrap my head around. Now, when we get into the mafia and stuff like that, I love that, and so I've written all of those chapters already, and then I've written some other stuff. But it's just like it's just funny how I didn't realize that writing the way that I do, that that there are just certain things that are really difficult and really challenging to dive into. You got to be in a certain headspace.
I think people don't fully appreciate how hard writing is and how much time it takes. I have an analogy that I use. I tell people, they ask me, what's it like being a writer? And I say, well, imagine that your life is the Thanksgiving table, and you've got the guests are all the different parts of your life. You've got family, and you've got work, and you've got your downtime, and your surfing the web time, and all these things. And those represent different people, as it were, sitting around the table of your life, and each of them you've dished out. Each of them has some of the turkey and the stuffing, and it's all very orderly, and you've got it managed. Now you let writer guy come sit at the table. Writer guy is like this, the guest from hell that just wants to grab everybody else's stuff and stuff it all down. And now your family and your friends, and they say they're mad at you, and you never have time for them because this other thing that you allowed into the table of your life has consumed everybody else's share. And it just, you get into it, and there's no money in it. It's the other way for me. I justify it by saying, well, this is what I do instead of golfing or whatever. Fortunately, as a chief legal officer, I make enough enough money that I can help fund the thing. But for, every dollar that you get back from a book advance or whatever, for the kind of thing I do, where you're doing this hands-on stuff, you're investing in the process. Just like I'm going and jumping on an airplane, I'll go rent a car, go out there and do all this. It costs money,
Yeah.
But it's a passion, and I don't regret that part of it at all. But I think people sometimes misunderstand how hard it is. It's almost like you've been gripped by some force that you can't control, and it forces you to have to do this. And friends of mine who are writers say the same thing, like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
But there is that sense of satisfaction when you get it down and you feel like you wrote something good. And as much as you want to be able to say, oh, I'm doing it, I'm just doing it for myself, for my art, I don't care what people say. It is gratifying when you get good positive feedback. And if it's an article, if you get likes and nice comments, or a good book review or whatever, it does make you feel good. But in the end, it's not why you're doing it, and you do it anyway, even if they were telling you were terrible, because you can't help it. It's just how it is, and it's who you are. Unfortunately, my long-suffering wife understands this about me, and hence, instead of coming home tonight, I'll be on an airplane, and I'll be up at certainly by 4 a.m. tomorrow, and out, scouring. I do love the outdoors. I'm a mountaineer by background, and so I'll be out there, scouring the roadside, anywhere where there's undergrowth and nasty stuff that could swallow a car. I'll be the guy to go in there and, bushwhack and see what I can find.
So I used to, I like to say that I've lived many lives, because I used to do ultra endurance events.
Oh, you did?
And, I fought professionally for a while, and then I got into doing these ultra endurance events. But I've been all over the world. And I was in Scotland once. I was in Beijing doing an event called the Agoge, which is an undeterminate period of time, typically like 3 or 4 days, where you're out unsupported in the wilderness with a group of people trying to figure out and do tasks. And a lot of times they're beating the hell out of you. It's a very military style endurance event. So you have people taking you out there, yelling and screaming at you, and doing lots of PT. I spent a lot of time doing really dumb things in the wilderness and crawling through all kinds of things. And I loved it. It was an incredible time.
Yeah.
I did the very first event that I did 55.5 miles through the Green Mountains in Vermont.
That's serious.
And yeah, it was, I've been up to Bloodroot many times, which is I don't know, I think something like a 13-16 mile hike from where we started out in Pittsfield, Vermont, up to Bloodroot. And we did that at night. The first time I did it, we did it at night, carrying a bunch of like kayaks and stuff filled with water. That was rough.
Yeah.
Trying to go up the side of a mountain to do that. Now, I also did, I did Death Race in 2019. It was the only time I did that event. That is the hardest endurance event in the world. And so I was there. I made it 30 hours before I got time hacked, and I ended up out of the event. But it was, I think it lasted right around 50 some hours. So I made it just over halfway through the event. But man, that was a rough event. It was tough for sure.
I haven't done that sort of endurance event, but I've climbed a couple of the 7 summits and done mountain climbing. The thing is, when you do mountaineering in the desert too, you're carrying your own water. So that can be, rugged stuff. But that's also why I like focusing on cases that arise in more rural areas, because I feel they're undercovered, and I just think there's sort of a romance to the rural West, especially, and I like being out and being immersed in that. My grandmother was the source of that. My grandmother, after my grandfather died at a relatively young age, had a heart attack. she ended up moving into a little artist's cabin in the middle of the Mojave Desert,
Oh, wow.
right up on a dirt road. At first she had water delivered in a tank, and then later she witched a well. But she had kerosene lamps for light, and it was her place was just amazing. She collected all these relics around the desert. She staked mining claims. You can imagine if you're a young, impressionable boy and for family vacation, you're going out into the middle of the desert, and here's this colorfully dressed grandmother, very vigorous, with a four-wheel drive truck and a sledgehammer, and she's bringing back rock samples, and she's got all these artifacts and interesting things everywhere for you to explore and look at. It fires your imagination, and that's what got me hooked on the desert, and I got into hiking and wilderness exploration because of that. And yeah, one thing leads to another, and the Berman case happening out in the middle of the Mojave, just now the case that I'm about to head off on happening in a rural part of California's Central Valley. That's the kind of thing that calls to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let everybody know how they can find you and all your stuff and your upcoming things.
Well, it's easy. I'm Doug Kari, DOUGKARI, and if you add a .com on the end of that, you've got my website, and I've got blogs up there. You'll see something about the Berman murders and various things that I post. And if you Google me, you'll see a lot on me at this point. So I do have a Facebook page. I'm on Instagram. Just posted my first video. It was actually about the case that I'm heading out on, and I'm going to start posting now. I've got somebody helping me with that. I'll start doing videos every week as I continue to build my platform. I'm fully committed to this, even though I am a lawyer and the in-house lawyer at a technology company. I see the two as going hand in hand, and I really don't look at the writing and the true crime, Jeff, as being a hobby. That would kind of belittle what it is in my life. It's an avocation, it's a passion, it's what I live for, and the legal skills that I develop in my day-to-day work of being able to research, dealing with authorities, all the things that you have to do as an attorney, they help inform my investigation and writing. So it all ties together. The investigator I use, for example, former FBI guy who helps me track people down, get cell phone numbers and all of that, develops information. He's also somebody that I use on the business side. And so it all kind of ties together and makes me feel complete. And I just love it. And I know you do too. This is something we can really be passionate about. And I know your viewers are the same. They're people who are passionate about this topic. And I'm so grateful for people who support this kind of work and who will participate in what is truly a participatory kind of a venture.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know people always ask me, I've got all these varied things going on all the time. But the truth is, all of it is working towards the same thing, right? And so all the different avenues and things that I'm doing really support one another and help. The podcast, I started that after the book. And it was really just another method to talk to people and, to get some of this out. And one of the things I was going to share this with you anyway. One of the things that just recently happened, I got approached by some documentarians that are talking about taking the book and, looking at, making a episodic show out of it, focusing on myths and legends within true crime. And I was like, dude, that's really cool. We'll see what happens. I would love to be part of something like that. And you just never know. Like you never know where these things are going to lead and how things are going to change. It is always so fascinating. But thank you so much. I know you have a busy busy rest of the, well, you have to get on a flight today.
We're on a
So,
flight.
yeah, so I wanted to make sure that we keep it as brief as possible so that you can take care of everything that you need to take care of. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on here and talk with me. And yeah, I will I will for sure be talking to you soon.
It's been great. The pleasure's mine. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of True Crime Myths, Legends, and More. I am excited to see and to kind of follow up and see what's happening and what happens with this trip out to California. And when Doug gets back and see what he finds out there. I know that if anybody's going to be able to go out there and find something, it'll be him. And that will be incredible if they can get some leads to figuring that out with all of that going on. So just stay tuned. I will update you guys. Next week we will be doing the live recap episode. Hopefully at that point I will have some more information and I'll update you guys then on the exciting happenings. So make sure you tune in for that. Make sure that you like and comment and subscribe and do all that stuff. Make sure that you let us know how we're doing. And I will see you on the next episode of True Crime Myths, Legends, and More. Oh, I